All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is part 2 of our first week of April video. I just want to kind of review. Last video, part 1, we went over the invasion of Normandy, which was the beginning of the end of the Nazi regime in Germany. The invasion happens in June of 1944. The Germans surrender in early May of 1945, so it is less than 1 year when Americans get involved in the Battle of mainland Europe that the war is over. But along their way, we talked about this at the end of the last video. I'll kind of hit this slide again just so you can see it. Americans sometimes accidentally came up on camps where they found lots of emaciated bodies, skin and bone only, lots of dead individuals of these camps. But and I'll show you some footage of some of those experiences and some give you some primary source, at least some people's interviews of what they saw while at the camps, so you can kind of take a look at some of those emotions. But going through some of these questions, these are sort of like textbook questions I would have given you in class, but just again, take notes on these, and keep these in the back of your mind, because again, we're not going through a lot of like every single experience of the Holocaust here. We're not doing Anne Frank, and we're not going to read Night by Elie Wiesel. We're not going to do a lot of those things here, but what I do want you to do, and I do want you to see, is how the American people found out about this. What did they get from this during the war? What did they get after the war? How did they see that here? And what did they believe were some of the reasons for that? So, go through these questions here. Prior to the beginning of World War II, what was the official policy of Nazi Germany in the 1930s? What was the main goal of this purpose and all those areas? So the policy was anti-Semitism, and the whole purpose was to get rid of the Jews. And they tried doing that by discriminating against these individuals so they could leave on their own accord. Like many people wanted African Americans to do in the Jim Crow South. Let's discriminate them, discriminate businesses, discriminate, just their public spaces. They hoped they could encourage them to leave on their own so they didn't have to worry about them. This is the same thing in Nazi Germany. Any Jewish businesses that were run by Jewish people, they were discriminated. Maybe they paid extra taxes. Maybe they were vandalized. Maybe they were, robbed, or thieves went in and stole things from them overnight. So this is where we really see the beginning of the anti-Semitic beliefs of the Nazis. All right, and the whole idea is they just want to get rid of them. Didn't matter how it happened, but mainly before the rise of like the whole Nazi party with Hitler. This huge massive movement it becomes. Prior to World War II, we see that the Nazis really just wanted to discriminate them, to get them to leave on their own accord instead of forcing them out. So when most European Jews fled at this time, most of them would flee to the United States, Latin America, and what was known as British-ruled Palestine, which now is present-day Israel, which was the biblical homeland of the Jewish people. It is there from a religion standpoint, from where Abraham was going to sacrifice his son on the mountain, but because he showed God his willingness to follow him no matter what, God provided a lamb, and that miracle is what pretty much is what allows that sacred spot to be there for the Jewish people in Israel. So actually it's in Jerusalem, what is now present-day Jerusalem. All right, so but most countries that they went to were there, and many of them were denied entrance because in 1933, 1937, it is the Great Depression for many places around the world, and no country in their right mind would allow a huge amount of immigrants in because of how difficult it was to find work. Someone who's a native-born American who expects a certain way of, or at least a certain example of, things to come and how they operate and how they do things. Maybe they expect a certain wage. They can't compete with someone who's an immigrant who can get paid less and afford to get paid less. So most countries deny them access because of the Great Depression. The Einsatzgruppen, what role did they play in killing European Jews before the Wannsee Conference? And then after this conference, what we call the final solution to the Jewish problem? So the Einsatzgruppen were mobile killing squads. They'd go from town to town, find Jewish people, and they would round them up, force them to dig mass graves, and then line them up and shoot these people into the graves and then cover them up. So as they went from town to town, they rounded these people up and arrested them for no real charge whatsoever. All right. Then we look at after the Wannsee Conference. The conference, they decided that instead of going from town to town and killing them off as it is, they found a much better way to do that, and that was to not better, but a more efficient way, and that was to send them to death in concentration camps, where they could either be worked for the Nazi party, for the government, or they could be exterminated. So that's the whole point of this idea. Okay. Then finally, I think there's two more questions. What was the response of the United States when word first got out regarding the concentration and death camps? Like when the media first reports it, what's the word? What happens? And then what did Roosevelt finally create to save more than 200,000 lives? So first off, most Americans did not know too much about the Holocaust because the media was instructed by the government to keep the stories out. As soldiers were going across, and maybe telegrams from family members went across the Atlantic Ocean. Letters got sent over. Mail was sent, and people knew. They found out about it. And they asked the government what was going on, but most of the people did not know about it because of the media. But also with this lack of immigration, nobody was entering. Nobody was coming into the country to tell the stories. So there was multiple ways. That's why they weren't there. But Roosevelt created the War Refugee Board at this time as well, which was against the objections of Congress to accept 200,000 people into the country who were refugees of the war. So something you can take into consideration there. All right. Finally, last one. As the war ends and soldiers see the atrocities of the Holocaust, what countries led the military tribunal to prosecute the Germans responsible for the crimes of the Holocaust and their crimes of war? And what were the results of the trial and the wide-ranging idea that came out? First off, the countries that prosecuted them were the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, the four major countries on the Allied side of the war. And the second part of this, many head German officials, as a result, were guilty of war crimes against humanity and other war crimes. Half of them were given the death sentence by hanging. As you can see in the picture here, these are the people that were on trial in Nuremberg. All right, and you can see the military police behind them, kind of, making their presence known. So these are the individuals that were put on trial. Half of these individuals were hanged in this picture. And then finally, the wide-ranging idea that comes out of this is the idea that individuals will be responsible for their own actions. Most of this reason that we look at here is because the people that were on these trials claim that they were only following orders and that they were told to do this. They were instructed to do this. That they didn't do this on their own. They did this to be able to come forward and they did it because they followed orders, and that was mostly it. All right, so this is what we look at here, some of the questions behind the Holocaust. But the key point here is, as soldiers get into not only here and as you look at the American forces, their route, the British forces taking the route north, taking Belgium, Netherlands, and the United States taking southern Germany. Throughout here, they each took their own camps. I think it was Bergen-Belsen, the British found, and then Dachau and Buchenwald is what the Americans uncovered. And then the Soviets coming from the east found the most famous one that we will all look at, and that's Auschwitz. So as they went across Europe, they found these camps, and these experiences were very, very telling for these individuals. And then I'm going to end this video here shortly, but what I want you to do is the following links below, like those documentary style videos. One of them is a dramatization from the Band of Brothers series about what they see. It's not like terrible, footage, but it's pretty sad to see how they try to recreate these concentration camps with these prisoners and what they look like. They did a really good job showing how Americans viewed this, what the soldiers saw. They did not expect this. Many of the soldiers stumbled upon these accidentally. All right, so that's pretty much what it comes down to here. So then the second video I'll show you then is one of the actual interviews of people that were there. Instead of a dramatization, it's actually something that was something that people could interview and see those experiences firsthand. All right, so you have that there. These are your notes for this week. There'll be 2 assignments posted, just 1 question for each assignment. Click the link for those assignments here, and then you should be good to go for the week. All right, enjoy, everybody. Have a good week. Bye. Oh, don't forget as well, Tuesday is the first time that will be available for the meeting. All right, so Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays for U.S. history. All right, have a good one, guys.